The retirement rules you were taught are wrong, not for everyone, but for 97.8% of the people following them. And if you're one of them, the plan you're relying on right now could leave you broke at the exact moment you can least afford it. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 2.2% these rules were actually built for, and whether you're one of them. Let's start with the rule almost everyone has heard, the 4% rule. The idea is simple. Save up a big enough pile of money, withdraw 4% of it every year, and theoretically, your money should last 30 years. It sounds clean. It sounds safe. It's also based on a study from the 1990s that used market data from one specific stretch of American history, a stretch with strong average stock returns and relatively low inflation. That's not the world we live in today. Here's the problem. The 4% rule assumes a fixed withdrawal every year, adjusted only for inflation, regardless of what the market is doing. But retirement isn't a straight line. If you retire right before a market downturn, say the market drops 30% in your first 2 years, and you're still pulling out that same 4%, you're selling investments at a loss just to cover your bills. That's called sequence of returns risk, and it's one of the most dangerous things in retirement planning, because the order your returns come in matters just as much as the average return itself. Two people can retire with the exact same amount of money, get the exact same average return over 20 years, and end up with wildly different outcomes, just because one of them hit a bad market in year one and the other didn't. The 4% rule doesn't account for that. It treats every retirement like it starts in a calm, average market. Most don't. So who is the 4% rule actually safe for? People with a large enough cushion that a bad first few years doesn't matter. People with flexible spending, who can cut back when the market dips instead of being locked into a fixed number. And people retiring during a genuinely average economic period, which, statistically, is rare. For most people, a flexible withdrawal strategy, one that adjusts based on how the market is actually performing, is far safer than a fixed percentage locked in on day one. Myth number 2. You need $1 million or more to retire. This number gets repeated so often that people either panic because they're nowhere close, or they delay retirement for years chasing a number that was never actually tailored to them in the first place. Here's the truth. The amount you need to retire isn't about hitting some universal number. It's about your specific expenses. Someone spending $80,000 a year needs a very different nest egg than someone spending $35,000 a year. Someone with a paid-off house needs less than someone still carrying a mortgage into retirement. Someone with a pension or rental income needs far less saved than someone relying entirely on savings and Social Security. The real formula is simple. Take your expected annual expenses, subtract any guaranteed income like Social Security or a pension, and multiply what's left by 25. That gives you a rough target based on your actual life, not a headline number designed to grab attention. For a lot of people, especially those with lower expenses or additional income streams, that number is nowhere near $1 million. For others with higher expenses and no other income, it might actually need to be more. The point is, the $1 million figure isn't wrong because it's too high or too low. It's wrong because it was never about you to begin with. Myth number 3. Social Security is going to run out, so don't bother factoring it into your plan. This one causes real damage, because people who believe it sometimes make worse decisions trying to compensate, working longer than necessary, oversaving at the expense of actually living, or claiming benefits too early out of fear they'll disappear. Here's what's actually happening. The Social Security Trust Fund is projected to face a shortfall in the future, but that doesn't mean the program disappears. It means that without changes, it may only be able to pay out a percentage of scheduled benefits from ongoing payroll taxes. Most projections put that number somewhere around 75 to 80%. That's a real problem worth planning for, but it's a very different problem than it's going away completely. Historically, whenever Social Security has faced funding shortfalls, Congress has adjusted it through tax changes, benefit formula adjustments, or raising the retirement age. That doesn't guarantee it happens again, but it does mean that it's just gone narrative isn't supported by history. The smarter move isn't to ignore Social Security in your planning. It's to plan for a slightly reduced version of it, so you're neither caught off guard nor making decisions today based on fear of a worst-case scenario that isn't actually the most. Myth number 4. Downsizing your home always saves you money in retirement. This one sounds obvious. Smaller house, smaller bills, more money in your pocket. But the math often doesn't work out the way people expect. When you sell a home you've owned for decades, you're often selling at today's market price and buying at today's market price, which means this savings from a smaller home can be eaten up fast by higher interest rates, closing costs, real estate agent fees, moving expenses, and renovation costs on the new place. On top of that, property taxes on a smaller but newer home in a different area can sometimes be higher than what you were paying on your old, larger home with a locked-in tax assessment. Then there's the emotional and logistical cost that never shows up in a spreadsheet. Leaving a paid-off home with no mortgage at all, and taking on new debt or draining savings to buy something smaller. For some people, downsizing absolutely makes sense, especially if the current home requires expensive maintenance or the equity unlocked meaningfully changes their financial picture. But treating it as an automatic money-saving move without running the actual numbers is how people end up with less flexibility, not more. Myth number 5. You should pay off your mortgage completely before you retire, no matter what. This one feels intuitive. No mortgage means no monthly payment, which means less stress. But it ignores opportunity cost. If your mortgage rate is low, say 3 or 4%, and your investments have historically returned more than that over the long run, aggressively paying off that mortgage instead of investing can actually leave you with less money overall. Every extra dollar you throw at a low-interest mortgage is a dollar that isn't growing in the market. There's also a liquidity problem. Home equity isn't cash. If you dump your savings into paying off a house early and then face an emergency, you can't easily pull equity back out without a loan or a sale. For some people, especially those who value the psychological piece of being debt-free, paying it off early is worth it even if the math says otherwise. But for others, especially those with a low fixed-rate mortgage and a long-time horizon, keeping the mortgage and investing the difference actually builds more wealth. This isn't a math question with one universal answer. It's a math question with a personal answer. Myth number 6. Retire as early as possible and claim Social Security as early as possible. Early retirement sounds like the ultimate win, and claiming benefits at 62 instead of waiting feels like getting your money sooner rather than leaving it on the table. But both of these decisions are far more permanent than people realize. Claiming Social Security at 62 instead of your full retirement age can permanently reduce your monthly benefit by roughly 25 to 30% for the rest of your life. That's not a temporary dip, it's locked in. If you live a long life, waiting even a few years to claim can mean tens of thousands of dollars more over your lifetime. Retiring early carries a similar hidden cost. It doesn't just mean fewer working years of income. It means more years your savings need to stretch. More why. Myth number 7. Your expenses will drop significantly once you retire, so you don't need to plan for as much. This one is maybe the most quietly dangerous, because it lowers people's guard right when they need to be most prepared. In reality, retirement spending often follows a pattern researchers call the retirement spending smile. Spending is actually higher in the early go-go years, when people are healthy, active, and traveling. It dips in the middle slow-go years as activity naturally slows down. Then it rises again in the later no-go years, driven almost entirely by healthcare and long-term care costs. So instead of a steady decline in spending, most retirees see a curve, high, then lower, then high again. Planning as if your expenses will just quietly shrink every year means you can be underprepared for the exact 2 phases where spending tends to spike the most. The beginning, when you actually have the health to enjoy retirement, and the end, when healthcare costs can escalate fast. So here's the honest answer to the question this video started with. Who is the 2.2% these rules were actually built for? It's people with large enough savings that market timing barely matters. People whose expenses happen to align almost exactly with generic averages. People who don't rely on Social Security at all. People whose housing situation happens to perfectly fit the downsizing math. People with mortgage rates high enough that paying it off early is the obvious right call. People who've actually run the break-even numbers before retiring early or claiming early. And people whose spending genuinely does decline in a straight line instead of following the smile. Stack all of those conditions together, and you can see exactly why it's such a narrow slice of the population. The fix isn't about finding one secret rule to replace all the old ones. It's about running your own numbers instead of borrowing someone else's average. Know your actual expenses, not an estimate pulled from a headline. Build in flexibility for bad market years instead of locking into a fixed withdrawal. Plan for a reduced but real version of Social Security. Treat downsizing, mortgage payoff, and early retirement as individual math problems, not automatic decisions. And plan for a spending curve, not a straight line down. Retirement planning isn't broken because the general advice is useless. It's broken because general advice gets treated like personal advice. The moment you start building your plan around your actual numbers instead of the average person's numbers, you stop being part of that 97.8% guessing in the dark, and you start being someone who actually knows where they stand. If this video actually changed how you're thinking about your own retirement plan, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps this channel reach more people who need to hear this. Subscribe if you want more videos like this one, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next breakdown. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.